Let's see how well you remember the types of power. Let's look at these several different examples in order to determine what type of power is primarily being exerted in the situation described. Sarah is having difficulty with her financial aid officer. Sarah talks to a friend, Eric, a senior in college, who has had similar problems with the same officer. Why is Sarah going to talk to Eric? What kind of power does Eric have over Sarah? Well, he has information, doesn't he? He has prior experience with the same person. So this would fall into the category of expert power. Let's look at the second illustration. Latiera suggests to her friends that they stay home this Saturday night to have a night in rather than a night out. Since Latiera is the life of the party and enjoyable to be around, her friends agree to stay in. So we're talking about the kind of power that Latiera has over her friend network. And obviously from the second sentence there, you see that she's the life of the party and she's enjoyable to be around. So this would fit under referent power because she's very charismatic and very attractive to her social network. Let's look at the final example. In the campus mentoring organization, Eduardo was unsure how to speak to his mentor about his temper. Eduardo sought advice from the president of the organization before approaching the mentor. So, if you're going to the president of the organization, this is someone that has a specific title over this group of people and would have obviously power over the mentor in this situation as well as the person seeking advice, Eduardo. So we would probably think of this as being legitimate power. You will definitely see a number of application questions on the test, and this is just one way of beginning to review for application questions or thinking about stories or illustrations of the different vocabulary we're learning. Let's keep going. There are a number of different ethical uses of power in which we persuade another individual or group of individuals of the way that we see things or the way that we want things done or accomplished. And when we apply the different persuasive appeals, which Aristotle developed appeals ethos, pathos, and logos, that is credibility, emotions, and logic, and we can build appeals based on these. Credibility is multidimensional. It includes a variety of aspects of who you are. You can build credibility in the situation, but you also build credibility through your reputation. That is that you develop trust, sincerity, authenticity. People are going to find you to be competent, and that is that you know what you're talking about and that you know the subject well. You're going to also demonstrate goodwill to them and energy and enthusiasm for what you're talking about, and that's going to help to build your credibility. And credibility develops in stages, but ultimately you want the other person to think that you have integrity and that they are able to believe you. Emotional appeals, which is the second type of appeals, Aristotle called this pathos because that's the Greek root word for emotions. And emotional appeals help to draw into the values and emotions the other person has, and we use this in storytelling often, in dramatic use of language and nonverbal as well. Then you have logical appeals, which we appeal to reasoning, we appeal to good support for the claims that we're trying to make, and we provide good reasons for what we're asking the other person to do or to think. Ways that you can also improve your skills are to build your assertiveness rather than your aggressiveness or your passivity, and we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about that. And then also, finally, you can use the state model. So let's look more about how we develop assertive skills and using the state model. Improving assertiveness is important in order to exert your influence of other individuals. On a continuum, you have on two ends of the continuum passivity and aggressiveness, and in the middle you would have assertiveness. Passivity is where you basically withdraw from the situation and you don't engage in it. That is, you stop talking about it, you avoid the other person, you don't want to address the issue. And what happens when people who are unsatisfied in their relationship and they're being passive constantly is they tend to start to complain to other people, to third parties who can't really do anything about what they're complaining about. However, that's their way of venting. Oftentimes people that are passive have emotions that build up, bottle up, and then they may even turn into aggressiveness at a later point in time. On the other end of the continuum is aggressiveness, When someone is aggressive, they have little to no regard for the other individual as they express themselves. So they don't consider the other person's rights. They don't regard the other person's contributions as being valuable, and they oftentimes engage in things like yelling, raising their voice, and using nonverbal and verbal intensity to really coerce and demean, demoralize, or possibly even scare the other person. Being aggressive is not an ethical way to exert your interpersonal influence. This would be more in terms of exerting coercive power and control over another person, which is not ethical. Instead, you want to be assertive. That is, you want to take responsibility for your own thoughts, ideas, and feelings. That is, using I statements and avoiding blame shifting. So taking responsibility means that you take also responsibility for good and bad that goes on in the relationship. You can express yourself, but you're going to express yourself by still having regard for the other person and listening to the other person and giving them the opportunity to speak, to be heard, and to use language that's appropriate within that context. You're going to describe your behaviors and your feelings specifically, rather than using hedgers which take off maybe the bite or the sting of what you're saying. You're just going to be specific about how you feel and what you think, and use your I statements in order to do so without blaming others. Maintain regular eye contact and a self-confident posture, rather than like those that are aggressive, oftentimes staring at the other person and having an overconfident, puffed up posture that is looming over their relational partner. You want to use a firm but pleasant tone. If you become too firm, then you're going to be perceived as aggressive, so you don't want to yell at them. And you want to be pleasant, but you also have to be firm because you don't want to be too passive either. The other person needs to understand that you're serious. You speak fluently regarding avoiding verbalized pauses and elongated pauses. Verbalized and elongated pauses gives an indication that you don't know what to say, you don't know how to express yourself, you're not sure of your feelings, you're not sure of your thoughts, you're not sure of your ideas, and you want to avoid that at all costs, because in assertiveness you are trying to speak with confidence. And then finally, you want to be sensitive to the face needs of the other person. You want to consider their ideas, their concerns. You don't want to make them look bad. You don't want to infringe on their rights. And so you're concerned about their face needs. And there's a high regard for listening and a value for listening in those that are being asserted, even though they're expressing themselves. Another way that you can exert yourself and exert your power and influence within a relationship ethically is by using the state model. This particular model was found in a chapter by Patterson, Greene, McMillan, and Switzer in 2002. The chapter went through and talked about the state model and the different steps, and so I want to kind of outline them out for you so that you would be able to utilize them yourself. The state model represents a way to protect the relationship and maintain confidence in the message, but still delivering it with humility. Not every message that you deliver is going to be easy, and in some cases it may even be risky for the relationship itself, and the meanings are very delicate that you're trying to discuss with somebody else. For example, how do you talk to a friend that you think betrayed your trust, or a coworker that you think misrepresented you to your boss? How do you talk to those sorts of people? How do you talk to a romantic partner that you suspect may be cheating on you? So there are a lot of different risky situations that we face that we need to express ourselves. We need to express ourselves in a way that we give the other person the opportunity to speak. So beginning with the first S, you have share your facts related to the subject. Start out with what you know and just lay it out for the other person. Then T, tell your story to reveal your interpretation of those facts. And make sure that you're very clear that this is what you see going on and this is how you're currently interpreting it. And that leaves you open also for other opportunities for the person to basically check your perceptions. Then you're going to ask the other person for their path. What is their story? This is an opportunity for dialogic listening where actually you can, rather than my story and their story, create a new shared story together. And that is by listening to one another and shaping your own meaning together. You talk tentatively rather than seeming like this is how it is whenever you share your facts and your story. So you don't jump to conclusions. Instead, you listen and you're humble and you know that you can be wrong going in the situation. And you encourage testing by inviting opposing points of view, like even inviting the devil's advocate, where you have the other person, tell me where I'm going wrong. Tell me what my what my facts, what their problem is. Tell me how I've gone wrong in the interpretation of my story. Redirect me where I need to. Really make sure that you encourage the testing of your own ideas and interpretation. And through this model, it's not just you exerting your power and influence, but it's you being open to somebody else exerting their influence over you as well. And in that shared experience, you're better able to find approximated meaning to the other person and to you.